Good evening and welcome to Crossroads. Yesterday, democracy was under attack. It was an assault on the Constitution by a group of radicals with expressed leanings towards a global terrorist and anti-Semitic hate group. It was a disruption of the peaceful transfer of power for House vote and the Speaker, and an undermining of the form of government we have written in the Constitution. And these enemies of democracy and of the Constitution damaged the very fabric of the American system. At least that's what some people are claiming. And I'm assuming right now that every single one of them is going to get off the hook without any real punishment. Because in this case, well, they align with the Democrat Party and the American left. I'm of course referring to the so-called insurrection at the Cannon office building just down the street from the U.S. Capitol yesterday. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters surrounded the building, and a large group of them made their way inside, where they're accused at least of disrupting the congressional vote for the Speaker of the House. Police had to arrest many of them in order to get them out of the building. The protesters were mainly pro-Palestinian. There was also a Jewish group against the state of Israel. A group of them remained outside while another entered the building and took over the Cannon Rotunda. As we can see in this video, in fact, police mainly allowed the protest to take place, at least at first. They stood in a circle around the main protest area while people chanted and clapped. Reports claim that police arrested 300 people, and video suggests there was at least some minor resistance. There were speakers at the protest outside as well. Among them was Representative Rashida Tlaib. She's a Palestinian. She's also with what's now being called the Hamas caucus. She's a member also of the so-called squad of socialist-aligned representatives. And during her speech, she's accused of spreading terrorist disinformation in order to inflame the crowd.
Continue to watch people think it's okay to bomb a hospital with children. You know what's so hard sometimes is watching those videos and the people telling the kids don't cry. And like, let them cry. And they're shaking, and somebody, you know this, they keep telling them not to cry in Arabic. They can cry, I can cry, we all can cry. If we're not crying, something is wrong.
Now, she then sent a message to President Joe Biden saying that not all Americans are with him on siding with Israel. And she told the protesters they are on the right side of history and that they were saving lives, and that to do that, she said, you do everything possible to save lives. Now, turns out, of course, that the narrative that Israel bombed the hospital in Gaza, well, it was fake. The story of an Israeli strike being peddled by most of the big corporate media who sourced the claims only from sources in Palestine. President Biden said that data collected by the Defense Department supports Israel's claims that it was not responsible for a deadly explosion at the Gaza hospital, in fact, in the parking lot. The bombing was allegedly from a misfired rocket launched by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is another terrorist group and a Hamas ally in Gaza. Now, in light of this, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stated that she's going to call for the censure of Representative Tlaib, and Rep. Tlaib also refused, notably, to apologize for falsely claiming Israel was behind the bombing of the hospital in Gaza. And regardless of all that on the fake news about the Israeli strike in the hospital, it has sparked protests and riots globally. Pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel groups were marching in the thousands in many countries. And many of them, they marched on the U.S. embassies. And the protest in Washington, with Tlaib and others leading the way, those were taken as an extension of the global protests, which in some cases turned violent. Now, it seems there were security concerns in Washington as well. Matthew Foldy, a political reporter with Spectator, posted a security alert allegedly from Willie McFarland, the House Sergeant at Arms. The alert warned of a potential for civil disturbances, and it was sent to all members and staff of the House of Representatives. After the protest yesterday, many conservatives noted the glaring similarities to the protests and riots on January 6th. While it could be argued, notably, That the protesters in this case, they didn't break windows, they didn't seem to get in fights with police. Many of the people in prison for January 6th, well, many of them did not fight with police or cause violence or break things either. In fact, most of the J6ers, what were they charged with? Well, they were charged with disrupting an official proceeding, parading, and trespassing. And that's also what the leftist protesters just did. In fact, all three of those. There are now calls for equal justice under the law. You know, the system of justice America is supposed to have, but most of it is being done tongue-in-cheek because, well, many people do not believe that it will happen. And the reason, and in fact the reason why they're probably right, is something that should concern everybody. A lot of people no longer believe we have equal justice under the law. There's a perception that we have a two-tiered justice system, a weaponized legal system where conservatives are treated with a system of zero tolerance and often even overstepping that with what looks like outright political prosecutions, and where people on the other side, people on the left, are given broad forgiveness and leniency, even sometimes for very serious crimes. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a video of the protest, and she stated, there's an insurrection happening now on Capitol Hill. Watch.
Okay, so we have an insurrection happening in the Cannon building. This is the march outside, the pro-Palestinian march going on outside.
Now, in the video, which was over 14 minutes long, the protesters were also heard shouting at the representative. The main Capitol building can be seen behind them as well. Watch. Now, after this, she issued a formal request to the Capitol Police to preserve all video surveillance footage, photographic evidence, police reports, and arrest records from all House office buildings that day. Now, in the office letter, she states that it was an insurrection. She writes, by launching an insurrection in the Capitol complex, these actors caused elevators to be shut down, staircases and hallways to be blocked, exits to be made inaccessible, and official legislative business to be obstructed, putting members of Congress, their staff, and political visitors at risk. Notably, the obstruction of an official proceeding charges right there. And she calls for investigations and prosecutions as well. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene notes as well that among the group that organized the protest was Jewish Voice for Peace. That group is defined by the Anti-Defamation League as a radical, anti-Israel activist group that advocates for a complete economic, cultural, and academic boycott of the State of Israel.